Stuck in a relationship where she feels like she's suffocated and smothered, not able to express herself and be who she wants to be, Karina kidnaps her girlfriend one day and begins to bury her alive, ignoring her pleas and cries of letting her out, as if animating a metaphor in reality. In this twisted, surreal story, Karina, the significant other of the protagonist, buries her girlfriend alive, acting as a representation of her being dead and not being present for her emotionally. All of protagonist's cries go on deaf ears as they also play as a representation of the lies that she was reciting to Karina. But the question is, was the protagonist the cold, dismissive partner Karina tries to paint her as? Or is Karina a deluded, selfish and manipulative partner who thought the protagonist to be as such? And is any of this real at all, or is it all a big metaphor? The protagonist, whom I will name Sarah, finds herself being buried alive by her significant other Karina, who keeps throwing dirt at her, believing her to be a corpse despite Sarah pleading with her that she is alive. Meanwhile, there are countless number of rats in the hole which nibble on Sarah, thinking of her as food, which she has limited time to convince Karina to get out of the hole before she becomes truly dead. Seeing how adamant Karina is in burying her and not changing her mind that Sarah is alive and not dead, Sarah finds a pathway in the ground leading to another hole where she finds another seemingly alive person who introduces herself as Remy. Remy has made a home for herself in the underground, living alongside rats, preferring to be here than the surface, as she calls it. Despite that, she can't deny not feeling lonely, feeling extremely ecstatic to see Sarah here. The surreal encounter baffles Sarah, but at the same time, it feels like a lucid dream, which quickly becomes normalized, not feeling if a living person being in the ground is even one bit strange. Remy seems a little naive and inexperienced in life, not catching up with the simple conversations, not understanding what Sarah is implying many times. For example, when Sarah tells her to help her as she's being buried by her girlfriend Karina, she explains it to be something cathartic as she buries her rats as well, not understanding that Sarah is talking about being buried alive, and it's not such a cathartic thing anymore and more like a homicide in a very brutal manner. Sarah tries to get out, but due to Karina throwing dirt consistently and having no proper place for grip, climbing out would be an almost impossible task. Remy, on the other hand, instead of helping Sarah get out, explains that she doesn't interact with people on the surface and urges her to stay in the ground with her, living in a nice and cozy place that she has made herself, which she calls Mischief, alongside the pack of her rats. Remy also explains that she doesn't want people to know that she lives here as she prefers the solitude, and it would complicate things. All of a sudden, she urges Sarah to play a card game with her, which she has created, calling it Oh Rats. After a game, she heads back up to the hole, observing Karina still throwing dirt, trying to fill out the hole. Trying to stop Karina yet again to snap out of it and stop burying her alive. Karina seems to be genuinely believing that Sarah is dead, when she explains that she mourned her for 3 days straight and finally it was time for her to bury her. No matter what Sarah tells Karina, she seems persistent in her belief that she is genuinely dead, not believing anything that she says. Almost giving up, not knowing what else to say, Sarah goes back down to Remy, who is in the next grave, communicating with Sarah through a small hole separating the graves. She even tells Sarah if she decides to stay, she and her rats can open up this tiny hole so Sarah can easily climb into her roomy grave. Going back up with Karina still hard at work burying Sarah, she tries to scare her that killing her will get her arrested, when Karina reveals that she's from a lawyer family and none of them have ever ended up in prison, so she has nothing to worry about. Going back down, speaking to Remy, trying to understand why she chose to live down here. She acts oblivious and says it's because of the rats, not really willing to open up and explain what is actually going on. All Remy seems to be concerned with seems to be her rats and playing the card game that she calls Oh Rats. Going back up to see what Karina is doing, she asks Sarah if she is truly alive, even though she probably isn't. Why is it that she never bought Karina roses? This explains this entire conundrum is not in fact about Sarah being dead, and it's more about Karina feeling left out and unattended to, painting Sarah as a dead person whose absence was not any different to her presence. The entire reason Karina is burying her is because she wants to make a statement that Sarah was acting like a dead person who was never present. Despite her accusations, Sarah explains that she was present and it was Karina who never wanted flowers, even explaining that she wanted Karina to be happy. In their conversation, it's soon revealed that both Sarah and Karina have been seeing therapists, with Sarah's therapist indicating Karina is very sensitive and she should learn to forgive people, which describes her personality very well, not being easygoing and blowing things out of proportion, going so far as burying her girlfriend due to some minor disagreements. Karina even explains that no one knows about what she's doing right now and that she will tell others after she's done, which in a way depicts that it might not be in fact a surreal fever dream, but in fact reality, with Karina taking all of her frustration and resentment with all the unresolved problems on Sarah. Going down to talk to Remy, she explains how one time the tunnels collapsed and she got stuck, when the rats came to her rescue and dug her out, depicting how close she feels to the rats. When Sarah asks her how long she has been here, she refuses to respond. She further explains that people on the surface are terrible and that's why she chose to be down here, at least feeling like she has friends and a home alongside the rats, animals which are commonly seen as rodents and pests which need to be exterminated. Going back up, Karina explains how Sarah is just a ghost and that's who she is talking to right now. The more and more she throws dirt, Sarah explains how she's hurting her and how sick of all of this she truly is, when Karina opens up saying that she's returning the favor of how she got hurt by Sarah, on how much she loved Sarah yet she didn't love her back just as much. Karina then soon reveals that Sarah has been dead for a long time, referring to the relationship that they had and how it wasn't a real relationship anymore. Finally, she explains that Sarah loved her girlfriend but not Karina and who she truly was and is, feeling smothered and stuck in a fake relationship with someone that she loved so dearly. Karina felt like she was pretending to be someone that she wasn't to impress Sarah and keep her happy, never feeling truly loved, which is the reason she has started believing Sarah is dead, as she never tried to find out who Karina is and acted figuratively like a dead person. After having a closure and Sarah starting to feel bad and sorry for Karina feeling this way, she says that she would give Sarah a second chance and would actually want to fix their issues and forgive her for quite literally burying her. Karina then mentions how much she is madly in love with Sarah, and if she was to be actually alive, she would like to give their relationship another try and would want to be back with her. On that note, she stops digging and leaves, saying if Sarah is truly alive, she would be back and try again. In here, Sarah has a choice to go back up to Karina or stay down under with Remy. Karina on one hand has a right to be upset and a desire to fix their issues, but blowing things out of proportion and literally burying Sarah alive is downright psychotic, and there are always better ways to have closure and a heart-to-heart than threatening someone's life and showing psychotic tendencies, physically blackmailing someone to get her way. In here, if Sarah chooses to go back to Karina, a surreal reunion is shown on how Karina is with teary eyes, happy to see Sarah alive. The specifics are not shown on how she got out of the grave, if she was asleep or if it was entirely an allegory to how she is like a dead person to Karina. Karina then explains that people thought Sarah is dead and couldn't find a pulse and put a sheet over her, ready to bury her. And if it wasn't for Karina, she would be buried a long time ago. Sarah finding it hard to believe, especially as Karina mentioned that nobody knows that she's burying Sarah while in the grave. Karina starts laughing psychotically, saying that it was the worst day of her life seeing her beloved Sarah die. That's when she instructs Sarah to get up and go home, as many people would be happy to see her, being very happy herself that Sarah is alive, even though for the entire story Sarah was begging her to let her out as she's alive, and she just simply didn't want to accept that. On another hand, if Sarah decides to stay on the ground with Remy, she and her pack of rats welcome her with open arms, happy that she decided to stay with them, making her feel at home, with Sarah even starting to feel better and happy that she stayed with someone that welcomes her as such. After all, it seems to be much better to be with someone who appreciates her presence than someone like Karina, who just completely dismisses that she's even alive. The last ending is choosing to succumb to the dirt and quite literally being buried alive and die. Another way to achieve this ending is through screaming in the very beginning when Sarah observes Karina burying her alive. Karina, thinking it's a ghost, she digs faster and buries Sarah tightly in the ground. That leads to Sarah slowly losing her consciousness as the dirt starts to suffocate her, eventually drowning and dying in the dirt, buried alive. So, what was this all about? Did this actually happen, or was it just a bad fever dream? Well, in my own opinion, in a way, it's a mix of the both of them. The entire story seems to be a metaphor of a relationship which has many flaws. It can be interpreted as a relationship where one person is being suffocated and unseen, feeling like an invisible person, whose needs and desires are constantly ignored and dismissed, or in other words, a one-sided relationship. Karina in here tries to paint an image that she was the one suffering as an invisible person who loved her partner Sarah very dearly, yet she didn't love her back as much, or at least she didn't express it. That's why she did exactly what she felt is happening to her emotionally, getting buried alive, ignored on every single plea to be listened to and taken seriously. This is what she does in retaliation to Sarah, or in fact as a way to show what she was feeling, a desperate attempt to be seen. Another interpretation could be that Karina is a manipulative and abusive partner who has psychotic tendencies, always wanting to be the one to be the center of attention. She is truly madly in love with Sarah, but as she explained it the best way herself, she is in love with the girlfriend, or the idea of a girlfriend, a property that she possesses, and not who Sarah truly is as a person and what her needs are. Karina consistently refuses to listen to Sarah and let her out, despite her multiple cries and pleas that she's alive. Clearly shown that she hears her, she doesn't want to give it a slight chance that she might be actually alive. This could portray how Sarah in fact is the one being smothered and stuck in a relationship where she feels like she's being buried alive. A slow and painful death, or in other words, a slow burn relationship where she is trapped and cannot escape, seeing her life pass before her very own eyes. This is the poetic and metaphoric way of explaining what is going on between Karina and Sarah. The other more literal way is Karina is downright burying Sarah, as she is very upset with her supposedly passing away and burying her herself, in a way for her to move on, as towards the end she explains that people thought that she is in fact dead, as they couldn't find a pulse and mistakenly announced her to be dead. Karina even mentions people would be delighted seeing Sarah to be alive. Something else which is very interesting and bizarre is that Sarah shares a wall with her next door neighbor in the grave, Remy. Remy is a peculiar girl who seems to have limited experience in the world, many times not understanding the essence of topics and conversations, and often diverting questions, just wanting to play the card game. Remy is seemingly a young girl who passed away under mysterious yet grim circumstances, hence why she doesn't want to be found. She is clearly dead, evident from her burly pigmented eyes and the scruffy way that she appears. Possibly someone murdered her and buried her in secret, with no one finding her remains. As she mentions, things would get complicated. Remy in fact was a good-hearted person who even in death wants to help her gravemate, letting her get into her own grave so she won't be lonely, even though the grave is not big, let alone with 2 people residing in it. Of course, the idea of a living person in the ground seems very unlikely, someone who lives with rats. So in a metaphoric way, it's a depiction of how certain people are mistreated and abandoned, like Remy, who finds companionship with rats, animals which are viewed as one of the most vile animals, always being mistreated. Rats are seen as pests and rodents, animals which are always seen as infestation who need to be exterminated. So maybe Remy finds similarities between herself and the rats, hence why she prefers the underground rather than the surface, finding a home with the rats than the people above. This is a strong indication that she possibly saw great mistreatment and injustice and was possibly killed, hence why she prefers to be away from humans. Anyway, it's been yet another great game by Angela He. Games with this particular beautiful art style, mesmerizing background music, and ambiguous poetic stories. It's been your host Star as always, and I will see you guys later. Take care.